Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're looking at well, how we really interact with generative AI. We've got a whole stack of sources here, and we're going to unpack, how these tools work, what their limits are, and crucially, how to use them safely. Yeah, our mission is to cut through some of the noise, give you a clearer picture from how they operate right down to, well, some surprising facts and practical tips.
And what's really interesting looking across these sources is this constant theme. AI, yeah, it's powerful, incredibly so sometimes, but it's still fundamentally a tool. And understanding that, its mechanics, its strengths, but also its weaknesses, that's the absolute key. It's how you use it effectively without falling into some pretty common traps.
A tool. That's a great way to put it. It makes you think, doesn't it? How well do we actually understand these tools we use more and more? And how does seeing it as just a tool help us with something like the Blackbox system our sources mentioned right at the start? What does that actually mean for us, the users?
That's a great question. So the black box idea is basically a simplified model. You have your input, that's your prompt. Then there's this hidden process inside the AI, complex calculations, neural networks. We don't see that bit. And then you get the output, the AI's response. We see the start and the end, not the middle. And that immediately tells you why having a human in the loop isn't just, a nice idea. It's essential. You have to review that output.
Okay, so if that middle part is hidden, then our input, the prompt, must be incredibly important. It's our main lever, right? How do we make that input, that prompt, really work for us?
Well, it really comes down to specificity.
Yeah.
And detail. You need to move beyond just a simple question. Think more like a detailed set of instructions. The more specific, the more context you give, the better the chance you'll get something useful back. Something that, doesn't need tons of editing. It's less like firing off a quick text, more like writing a clear brief for someone who's very capable, but very literal.
Okay, literal. Can you give an example? Where did that detail really change the game?
Oh, absolutely. Let's say you ask an AI, create multiple choice questions about light. Simple enough, right? But the AI just predicts what you might want. It could be too simple, too complex, wrong curriculum entirely. But if you add the details, like create a 10-question multiple-choice quiz, base it on the UK National Curriculum, Year 3 Science, topic.light. Oh, and include the answer key. Make sure the questions avoid jargon. Much more specific. Now the AI is far more likely to give you something accurate, relevant, and needing maybe just a quick check.
Right, that makes sense. And, it gets really interesting because the sources point out AI isn't just text anymore. That feels like a big shift.
It is a big shift, yeah. Text is still the main thing, maybe 80% of the output. But these systems, they can generate images, video, audio, even computer code now. We saw some great examples in the readings. An English teacher getting AI to make custom pictures of her dog paragliding just for a creative writing prompt, or drama students generating unique images of Treasure Island to spark ideas for performances. It just shows that creative potential when you prompt it well. It's quite adaptable.
And if that first output, whether it's text or an image, isn't quite right, we're not stuck.
No, not at all. You can tweak it. You refine the output with more prompts. It's like a feedback loop, really.
Yeah.
You could ask it to, say, simplify the language or change the tone, make it more formal, maybe shorten the response to under 200 words. You iterate. You keep refining until it's closer to what you need. But, and this is the crucial bit, you always do that final check and adapt it yourself. The human touch.
Okay, so we've talked about the power, the prompting, this iterative process. But the sources were really clear on something else. You don't need to be like a deep tech expert in machine learning to use AI. But you absolutely must understand its limitations. What are the big ones we need to watch out for?
Yeah, and this gets right to the heart of why human judgment just can't be replaced here. The biggest limitation, AI can make stuff up. It produces misleading or just plain wrong information. We call them hallucinations. Sometimes they're just bizarre, like that example of adding glue to pizza sauce, clearly nonsense. But often, they're much sneakier. They might invent facts that sound plausible, cite research papers that don't exist, or draw conclusions that seem logical but are totally false. It's the believable wrongness that's the real danger.
Huh. It still feels weird that a machine would just hallucinate. Why does it do that? Especially in that subtle, convincing way.
Well, it's because these large language models, LLMs, they're basically incredibly sophisticated prediction engines. They work by finding patterns in the huge amounts of data they were trained on. So if that data had gaps or biases or just errors, the AI learns those flawed patterns and reproduces them. Plus, it doesn't have real-world understanding, no common sense, it doesn't know anything, it just predicts the next most likely word. or pixel. So when it hits a gap in its knowledge, it doesn't stop. It just fills it in, predicting what should go there based on patterns, often with quite a bit of confidence in its tone. And this also means the output might just be inappropriate for your specific need, like using American spellings when you need British ones, or suggesting, I don't know, outdated teaching methods.
Wow. Okay, so that means we have to be constantly critical, really scrutinize everything. How do we actually mitigate that risk? What's the practical step?
Your own expertise is paramount. Your knowledge, your judgment. That's your best defense. You absolutely have to check the AI's output against reliable, trusted sources. Whatever standard in your field, curriculum documents, official guidelines, established facts, and always remember, you, the user, you are professionally responsible. For the prompt you write, yes, but critically, for how you use the output. The AI isn't accountable. You are.
Right, accountability rests with us. Okay, so beyond hallucinations, another big flag raised in the sources was bias. Where does AI bias come from?
It can creep in from a few different places, actually. First, there's what you might call prompt bias.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the way you ask the question subtly nudges the AI towards a certain answer. For example, asking, why do students struggle with maths? Sort of assumes they do struggle. A more neutral prompt would be something like, what factors influence students' experiences learning maths? Yeah. That allows for, a broader, more balanced answer. Then second, the bias can just be baked into the training data itself. If the data reflects societal biases, racial, gender, whatever the AI learns those and, well, perpetuates them. We see this in text and definitely in image generation too. And third, you've got the potential for the developer's own biases, conscious or unconscious, to get embedded in the algorithms they design.
That sounds incredibly difficult to deal with, especially if we can't see inside that black box. How do we even begin to tackle that?
It is really hard because we often don't know how the system reached a particular conclusion. That makes fixing unwanted results or even just judging if it's fair very challenging. So the main defense, again, it circles back to critical thinking, constant human oversight, especially because AI, as we said, can sound so plausible, so convincing, even when it's dead wrong or subtly biased. Persuasive, yes, but still just a machine predicting patterns.
Okay, one last point on limitations before we move on. Copyright, intellectual property. What's the key thing for users to keep in mind there?
Right, IP. If you're adapting anything generated by AI, you need to be careful. You should try to ensure you have permission from the copyright holder of any original work the AI might have drawn upon, even if it's not obvious. And just generally, maybe be cautious about widely sharing things directly generated by AI, like sticking an AI image straight onto your company or school website. There could be risks of secondary infringement down the line. It's an area that's still, evolving legally. So caution is definitely the best approach for now.
This all leads us to something else the sources highlighted, which I found really fascinating and maybe a bit concerning. It's our tendency to, well, give AI human qualities. What's this anthropomorphizing all about?
Yeah, it's when we talk about AI using human terms, giving it a name, maybe a gender, saying it thinks or learns or sees. We also do it visually, right? Giving AI a cute smiley face icon instead of showing, say, a diagram of a neural network or just some code.
Yeah.
We're basically projecting human attributes onto technology.
Okay, but
Yeah.
why is that such a problem? It feels kind of harmless, maybe just a way to make it easier to understand.
Well, the sources argue it's actually far from harmless. It encourages us to think about AI in the wrong way. It suggests it has agency, like it can make its own choices, or that it's inherently good or evil, when really it's just technology, a tool built on math. And subtly, it shifts responsibility away from the humans who design and deploy these systems and kind of onto the technology itself as if it were responsible. Even more concerning, especially maybe for younger people or vulnerable individuals, it can lead to forming attachments to these systems. That increases the risk of manipulation, whether intended or not. And it can also reinforce stereotypes, like when AI assistants are predominantly given female voices and personas.
Okay, I see the risks now. So what can we do about it?
Yeah.
In our own language, how we talk about AI in our work or classrooms.
We can make a conscious effort to clean up our language, as one source put it. So instead of saying the AI thinks, maybe say the AI application is designed to, or the developers program the system to. Focus on the design and function. Use more technical, accurate verbs like detect, input, match, generate, produce, instead of see, look, think, create. and visually, if possible, represent AI with diagrams, flowcharts, maybe interconnected lines, rather than human-like faces or brains. Just by being more precise in how we talk about it, we can help shape a more accurate understanding of what AI is, and crucially, who holds the responsibility for its actions.
Right, focusing on the function, not personifying it. Okay, so we've looked inside the black box, talked to limitations, bias, how we talk about AI. But there's another layer our sources brought up, one that's often completely invisible,
Yeah.
the environmental cost. This was pretty eye-opening.
It really is. And it's a crucial point that often gets lost in the excitement. Generative AI. It needs massive amounts of energy. We're talking thousands, tens of thousands of servers running constantly in data centers, and all those servers generate immense heat, so they need continuous, powerful cooling systems. This whole process is just, well, turbocharging the global demand for data centers.
Turbocharging.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Just how big is the energy drain we're talking about?
Well, one figure that stood out was that the roughly 7,000 major data centers worldwide already consume more electricity than most entire countries.
Yeah.
It's putting huge pressure on energy grids, including renewable energy supplies. It's actually undermining the carbon neutral goals of even the big tech companies building this stuff. It directly fuels the climate crisis because greenhouse gas emissions are soaring to power it all.
And it's not only energy, right? Water consumption is a factor, too.
A huge factor, yes.
Yeah.
An average large hyperscale data center, the kind needed for training these big AI models, can use something like 2.1 million liters of water every single day, mostly for cooling. And what's really concerning is that these facilities are often built in places where water is already scarce.
So just to be clear, using AI for something like a search is way more resource intensive than just using a standard search engine.
Oh, significantly more. Orders of magnitude more power needed for a similar query, typically, and images are even worse. One source mentioned that the least efficient models use the energy equivalent of like half a smartphone charge for every single image they generate. Plus, the computing power needed just to train these models keeps growing exponentially year on year. More power, more water, more resources.
Is there any positive spin on this? Any counter-arguments or hope for improvement?
There are a couple of points, yes. Some of the major tech companies involved are also big investors in renewable energy, so they are trying to offset some of this. And there's the argument, maybe a bit optimistic, that AI itself could eventually help tackle climate change. Through better data analysis, optimizing energy grids, finding new solutions, there's also some hope pinned on smaller, more efficient AI models. They're expected maybe around 2025 or so. They might offer a less energy-hungry path forward. But that's still a maybe.
Which brings up a really practical question for you listening. Knowing this hidden environmental cost, how should that influence how you decide to use AI?
That's the core question, isn't it? As users, we really need to be aware of these sustainability issues. It's part of the bigger picture. So every time you think about using an AI tool, maybe just pause for a second. Ask yourself, is this really the best, most appropriate tool for this specific task? Could I get this information just as easily with a quick web search? Or maybe by asking a colleague, do I truly need to generate a brand new AI image? Or could I find an existing photo or illustration that works just as well? It's about mindful use.
We have covered a huge amount of ground today.
Wow.
From the nitty-gritty of writing a good prompt right through to the, well, planetary impact of these systems.
And if you tie it all together, the thread running through everything is the absolute non-negotiable need for human judgment, human critical thinking. AI is an incredibly powerful tool, no doubt, transformative even, but it's a tool that demands our constant attention, our review, our responsible handling, and a clear understanding of what it actually is. Your expertise, your awareness, those are the essential safeguards here.
So what does that mean for you? It means you're not just a passive user. You have the power to shape what AI produces, yes, but also how it's seen, how it's used, and ultimately, its real-world impact.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over. Considering how AI can produce output that feels so human, yet its inner workings are purely mechanical, purely pattern-based. And now, knowing its significant environmental toll, where do you draw the line? Where's the balance for you in your own work, your own learning, between the undeniable convenience AI offers and the responsibility that comes with using it thoughtfully?